friends of Brits here with a very special Q&A all about Resident Evil 3, the remake, the R3 make, the remake, as the cool kids call it, or maybe that's just me, I don't know. Anyway, I got to go to San Francisco last week and play a few hours of Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil Resistance, so huge thank you to Capcom for providing travel, and thank you for those chocolate chip cookies. Oh my god, they were so good, I'm still thinking about them. Anyway, I digress. So yes, I got to play a few hours of Resident Evil 3, and I'm going to go into a very, very deep, nitty-gritty dive on this week's episode of What's Good Games, but for embargo, I thought it would be fun to get some questions from our Patreon community and our Facebook fan page and talk about what I can talk about, because some things I can't talk about. So if you've seen the Resident Evil 3 reveal trailer, you more or less got to see the main parts that I played. So my demo takes place, I am Jill, I am leaving the subway, and I'm trying to turn everything back online so we can GTFO and get out of Raccoon City, because it is a very, very bad place to be. Wasn't sure if I was going to break out the whiskey for this, but we're talking about Resident Evil 3, so to me, that's a totally worthy situation. So cheers, and let's get into your questions. Haha, I'm so excited. Our first question comes from Mitch Krassin, and Mitch's question is, what percentage of Resident Evil 3 Remake will be completely new content as opposed to reimagined pieces? While I obviously cannot give you a 100% accurate answer, because I have not played the whole game yet, what I can tell you is that for my small slice of gameplay, I did see new locations, and I saw a lot of new locations, which is really cool and really exciting because it gives Raccoon City and the game more of a believable personality. Is that what I'm trying to say? I don't know what I'm trying to say, but hopefully you know what I'm trying to say. New locations, new enemies, there are new puzzles, there are new collectibles, and there are new documents to find, which if you are a Resident Evil lore nerd like myself, you will appreciate the additional backstory that you get from reading these things, and it's just a lot of new. So you get a lot of new in this game, which I think is 100% the right call. This is being described as a reimagining, and it 100% feels like a reimagining. It feels familiar in the sense that you got Jill, and you got Carlos, and you got Nemesis, and you have some of the supporting side characters. You got the city, you got the subway, you know, all things that we've known to be. But it also feels new at the same time. Whereas when I think of Resident Evil 2 Remake, that felt very familiar, and this feels very new. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's a reason why Resident Evil 2 still can stand on its legs and still be considered a masterpiece. The original one is because it still holds up, and I feel like Resident Evil 3 just hasn't aged as gracefully as RE2, so it makes sense that for this new remake they would go with more of a reimagining, more so than they did with RE2. Did that make sense? If you want to play a drinking game, take a drink every time I say reimagined in this upcoming segment. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of some of these reimaginings, grammar is hard, that I came across during my demo. I'm going to get as specific as I can, but for obvious reasons, I can't get too specific about some of them. Anyway, so first and foremost, Raccoon City, man. Yeah, it's been reimagined because it's 2020. We have the technology. Capcom has the technology to create a more robust, a larger, more detailed city than what we got in the original Resident Evil 3, and it was really fun to walk around and look around and see what kind of shops were there and get an idea of maybe what life in Raccoon City would have been like before, you know, the zombies and T-virus and all that kind of shit broke out. I had this really cool moment while I was playing, because while a lot of it does feel new because of the like new buildings, and obviously it's over the shoulder now, it's not top down, there's more details. There was a moment where I was walking through an alleyway, and there's these red brick buildings on either side of me. There's like this creepy atmospheric music playing. There's fires everywhere. There's zombies like clanging on the chain link fence to try to get to me. And at that moment, I was like, oh yeah, like this really is Resident Evil 3. And it was a really cool feeling. The other thing about reimagining, take a shot or a drink. Don't get too drunk. I care about you too much for that, was the puzzles. So if you've played the OG Resident Evil game, there are going to be some fun nods, some fun throwbacks to puzzles of old, puzzles that will not work the way you anticipate them to, but it was still really fun to see those and see how they've kind of been tweaked and redone to fit the game. I can't say more than that. Dang. But I can talk about another thing that's been reimagined. The enemies. So some of them have been reimagined. A lot of them have been, and I will talk specifically about my good friend, the Hunter Gamma. Remember that guy? Oh, he's real nice. He's really effing terrifying, and I would highly, highly suggest avoiding them if you can. But you really can't, because they're always looking for you. Because they love you. They just want a hug. Another thing I'm super duper excited about is Jill. I feel like Jill has a personality now. And even in my notes, which I don't have with me, I wrote Jill has a personality. So I feel like if you've played Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 3, you've noticed she's not the most interesting character. And granted, product of the 90s, this is first and foremost a survival horror game, so I understand that character development wasn't the most important thing. Not all the emphasis went on that. But it's great now to see the kind of character Jill is. She appears to be very quippy, very smart, very quick, very sassy, and I love that about her, especially when you get her and Carlos bantering back and forth.
Carlos, I've reached the main avenue. Which way do I go?
See a big transmission tower? That's the substation. You'll have to circle around through an alley to your right to get there.
You mean the alley that's on fire?
Maybe. Surely a tall drink of water like yourself can put out a few flames.
Fuck you.
Now, if you've played Resident Evil 3 and you're familiar with Carlos, or if you're not familiar with Carlos, he's, in the original game, he's very, he thinks he's a very suave ladies man, and he has all these funny moments where he's obviously trying to hit on Jill, but she's just, not really having any of it. And that definitely is back in this game, but he isn't creepy, or he isn't too forward. He's cute. I think he's charming. I don't know if Jill thinks he's charming. Probably not, but we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how their relationship and friendship evolves over the course of the game. Maybe they'll bang. So TLDR, Mitch, a lot of it does feel new, and a lot of it has been reimagined to a point where it almost feels new, but I think that is the right call for this game. I think this game definitely can benefit from that, and it's going to be great to see, what else happens. Because if I've experienced all the new things that I have during my short time with it, I can only imagine, what else is waiting for us to discover. So exciting. So exciting. Cheers. Can you tell I've taken a break? You can tell because my whiskey, not as full as it was when I first started this video. Whoops. Our next question comes from Anakinjmt. Anakinjmt's question is it as scary as 2? I had to watch someone play the whole game because I can't play scary games with the exception of a Resident Evil 4. That depends, Anakinjmt, on your definition of horror and what twists your panties in a bundle. So if you can handle Resident Evil 4, I would say you're going to have an easier time with Resident Evil 3 than you did with Resident Evil 2. So Resident Evil 2, for the most part, was very, atmospheric tension-building horror, right? Where you'd be walking down a long corridor, you'd hear the sounds outside of whatever, and you'd have the police station creaking, or maybe the buzzing of a light, and it was dark, and you could hear things moving in the background, and you were, fucking with yourself, because you're anticipating that something's going to pop out at you at any moment. Then, the other side of Resident Evil 2 is you have Mr. X. So depends. How did you do with Mr. X? Because I feel like Resident Evil 3 is more of the Mr. X kind of horror. It's more of you're downtown, there's a lot going on. It's never really quiet. It's never really empty. There's always stuff happening. So it's much more action oriented in that way. And I'm going to get to that in the next question. But it depends on what you like. What you like. I did squeal a few times when I was playing, primarily when Nemesis would pop out and be like, "What's up?" Or when I was focusing on one zombie, another zombie would come up behind me and bite my neck. That was very terrifying also. So definitely not as slow burning as RE2, but definitely has its moments of more action and more, oh my god, there are so many zombies, help. Speaking of action, Lucy Yearwood asks, is it more action-y or survival horror-y? Definitely more action-y, and this is something Capcom has been upfront with since they announced the Resident Evil 3 remake. But that said, there are, of course, still survival horror elements, a lot of survival horror elements. This is a Resident Evil game after all. So, for example, there was a moment where I found myself in a room, and this room had a lot of goodies in it, a lot of goodies that I really wanted to bring with me, but I had all my puzzle pieces in my inventory because you never know when you're going to need those. So I had to have a real talk with myself and try to decide what I could leave behind, what I could combine, and what order I could pick stuff up, because maybe if I pick this up, I can combine it with that. And it was the tried and true Resident Evil item shuffle. But it was I've always loved that about the games. I know some people don't like the inventory management, but I think it's part of the charm and puzzle aspect of these games that I really like. But going back to more action stuff, there is a dodge button. So if you tap, I think it was R1 when I played. I think I'm allowed to say that. I don't know why it would matter. I'm sorry if I'm not. Anywho, you tap that, Jill kind of like jukes to the left or to the right, depending on which way you're pointing the analog. And if you time it just right, when a zombie is about to grab you or when Nemesis is about to get you, Jill will do a somersault. And if you time it correctly, it'll kind of do this cool, like, briefly, like, slow-mo animation where she turns around and aims at the person who tried to get you, or the zombie that tried to get you, and then you get a really good opportunity at a headshot. I was struggling to get the timing down correctly. I did nail it a few times, but there are other times where I thought I got it right and I didn't, and I ended up getting bit on the neck, and it was a very, very sad time. Also, to help with crowd control, there are numerous red barrels scattered across the streets of Raccoon City for you to shoot, and when you shoot them, boom, big explosion. It's a lot of fun. There are also generators now. I think they're being called generators, and you shoot those, and it kind of puts out this field of electricity, which shocks and stuns zombies, and that's always a fun time too. So little things have been added to complement the more action-forward nature of Resident Evil 3. Sergey P asks, since Resident Evil 4, having laser sights was kind of an iconic feature of the Resident Evil franchise. Are laser sights available in Resident Evil 3? I cannot confirm or deny, but I can tell you that weapon modifications are back. Martha Emery wants to know, is Nemesis handled similarly in Resident Evil 3 as Mr. X was in Resident Evil 2? Any key differences you can share? Nemesis, my good friend Nemesis. I had a few encounters with my friend Mr. Nemesis. Yeah, I found it was just best to run. Just best to run, because you never know when he's going to freaking pop out of a wall. You never know if you're going to be prepared or not to survive. And I say prepared to survive, not prepared to win. Because, oh boy, I found it was best just to freaking do a 180 and run. It was funny, when I was in the demo room, there was maybe 6 other people playing the game as well. And I could tell which people were trying to take him down, because it was just a lot of cursing, a lot of, he like 1-hit me or he 2-hit me, and he's not one to be fucked with. So I found my best strategy was just to like fucking hightail it out of there. He has quite the arsenal. He has a flamethrower, he has tentacles, he has a lot of weapons that Mr. X did not have. If you're not familiar with the Resident Evil lore, Nemesis is essentially a mutated tyrant. He's a tyrant infected with a parasite that gives him human-like thought to think, human-like intelligence. That was a very, very hard sentence to say. I blame the whiskey. It gives him the ability to use weapons. He is self-aware. He's a very smart cookie, that Nemesis, and it's just There was a moment when I was playing and I had to get to a specific location, and I had my good buddy Nemesis pop out of a wall and start chasing me. And I got lost. And getting lost in Raccoon City when Mr. Nemesis is after you is a very, very, very bad situation to be in, because he does not stop for anything. I ran into a room because I thought for sure I would be safe. Oh no, he just ducked and like put his hand on the door frame to like scoot himself past, and he just continued chasing after me. And eventually I got so lost that he caught up to me. I think he like stuck me with one of his tentacles and stepped on my face. I think it was my face he stepped on. He did something. Either way, that was the one time I did die during my time with Resident Evil 3. And that was, I feel kind of honored. I feel like it's a rite of passage to be stepped on by Nemesis. Did that get weird? A little. Jason Belke asks, does it have the risk of not meeting the expectations set by the RE2 remake? Yeah, I think whenever you release a game like Resident Evil 2, which is incredibly well received, which does the original game such a great service, I think you've set the bar very, very high for disappointment. Well, set the bar very high, which can lead to disappointment if those expectations are not met. There we go. Nailed it. But what's interesting about the Resident Evil 3 remake as opposed to the Resident Evil 2 remake is I think the nostalgia for RE3, that expectation isn't as high as it was for RE2. So I feel like as long as Capcom gives us Jill, Carlos, those major plot points, give us a badass looking Nemesis, I think we as fans are going to be satisfied. I think it comes in terms of quality. I think the tricky part comes in terms of the quality delivered, right? Because RE2 was such a high quality game. That's what we've come to expect from Capcom recently. They've been killing it with their releases. So I think as long as Capcom can nail nostalgia, build upon that nostalgia, and deliver a polished game that's high quality, I think we'll be good. It's just hard to say. It's interesting. And that's something I've thought about, is Resident Evil 3 isn't the masterpiece that most people would agree. I can't speak for everyone. I think most people would agree that Resident Evil 3 isn't the masterpiece that Resident Evil 2 is, or was. Still is. Still a masterpiece. So that's where it's going to be interesting to see, like, where do those expectations, like, lie with everyone, and how does it get received if it is treated like a complete reimagining. Food for thought. Thoughts to ponder. We'll find out in a couple months. A month and a half. A month and a week. The next question comes from Jason Billingsley. How easy is it to run out of ammo? I ran out at the kennel in Resident Evil 2 and kind of stopped playing there. So I've talked about this many times on the show. My accuracy when it comes to shooters, first person, third person, it's shit. It's real bad. It's just something I've had to accept about myself, that my accuracy sucks. So I am a player who tends to go through a lot more bullets than the average player. But with that said, I did not find myself running into any issues. So I like to, when I'm playing Resident Evil games, I like to explore every nook and cranny. I like to find every box I can. You know, you slash it open with your knife, you get bullets, you get an herb, whatever. Find gunpowder, combine the gunpowder, get more bullets. That's the way I like to play. So I never found myself without enough ammo to get by. Now, I think a staple of Resident Evil is you have to learn when you can spare the ammo. You know, if you're in, let's say, an area and there's 3 zombies, right, and they're shuffling around. If they're off to the side, you have to make that decision. Do I try to take them down now, because I know they're going to be here when I come out, or do I just run past them? And there were a few times when I had to run past the zombies, and then I came back and then at that point I knew I had enough ammo that I could take them out. So it's just all about, again, survival horror, right? This is one of the main elements of the franchise and of the genre. So I would say if you ran out of bullets by the kennel in RE2, I would ask if you spent enough time exploring and finding extra ammunition or extra gunpowder, because I think Capcom has always done a really great job at making sure those resources are available. I mean, unless you're playing on one of the super duper hard difficulties, then I got nothing for you. You're a badass. Last but not least, we have a question from Jake Vandeusen. Did I say that right? On a scale from 1 to 10, how fucking wrecked are we going to be after our encounter with Nemesis? Oh, dude. Like I was saying earlier, I saw him and I just freaking ran. I ran very, very far. But the problem is, he's just very, very fast and he will catch up to you. You cannot get far when Nemesis is chasing you. And, yeah, again, it was funny to listen to people try to take him down, and you can slow him down, kind of like I did with Mr. X, but I just found myself running. Why? Why waste ammo on a thing you can't kill, you know? Well, friends, that'll do it for this special Q&A all about Resident Evil 3. It's been a great day. I obviously love talking about Resident Evil, and I love drinking whiskey, and I like making videos, so it's just been kind of like a win-win-win. Thank you so much for all of your questions, and make sure you stay tuned to this week's episode of What's Good Games, or stay tuned for this week's episode of What's Good Games, because I'm going to get in the nitty-gritty with my girl Andrea about Resident Evil 3, about certain things that I did not touch base during this video, including Resident Evil Resistance. I had a lot of fun playing that online mode, and it really surprised me, and I think it might surprise you too. Ooh, the suspense. Anyway, thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.